Hi everyone, Tony here. Hope you're doing well. I have a special guest with me here today, Jamie Finn, the co-founder and president of Securitize. And you may recognize Jamie because we met at World CryptoCon, and I had interviewed Jamie last year, but he's back to give a bit more details about Securitize and the plans that they have for 2019. So Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, glad to be here. It was a great interview there, Ben, and I'm looking forward to this one.
Awesome. So, Jamie, I think there's been a lot of great news around Securitize and all the work that you've been doing. But for those who may not know about Securitize, can you give us a brief overview, the history, the services you provide?
Yeah, sure. So Securitize was born in the summer of 2017, and the general idea around it was we wanted to tokenize a venture capital fund, and we realized in trying to do that it was a security and there was no utility to a venture capital fund. And so at the time, the founders of Spice VC went out and looked for a platform. They weren't able to find one, and so they decided to build one themselves. And then in November of 2017, we spun out Securitize as a new company. I came on board as one of the president and one of the co-founders of the business. And then from there, we launched at BTC Miami, or BTC North America in Miami, with 5 customers, and since then have been running a variety of different issuances and onboarding a great many new customers that want to issue digital securities on the Ethereum blockchain today.
That's awesome. And it's obviously, where we're headed, where the tokenization of securities, and I think the service that you provide is definitely needed. I think you're ahead of the curve for sure. And I think other companies are recognizing that because recently you got a round of funding with the combination of Coinbase, Ripple, and Blockchain Capital. Can you give us a bit of details around how that funding came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few months ago, we concluded that we needed some more capital to grow the business more quickly, because to date, we had essentially bootstrapped the business with our great customer base paying us every month. And so as a software as a service business, we saw things growing, but we needed capital to grow more quickly. And so we went out and we were lucky to have Blockchain Capital as not only, it's sort of like that hair club joke, it's not only am I a customer, but they're all, so BCAP is actually a customer of Securitize. And we tokenized a piece of their fund in a token upgrade that we did for them when they needed some compliance layers, which is something that we developed. And then as a part of that, BCAP suggested that we should start to look at some strategic investors that could come in and really help us grow the business more quickly. And so, we were fortunate enough to meet Vanessa from the Ripple team on the investment side, as well as quite a few of the folks in the Coinbase group. And we're able to kind of tell them the story about digital securities, and they were, interested in it. Everyone kind of realizes it's early days, and so the way we've capitalized the business is really to be able to grow at a measured pace for a few years. And we think we're in a really solid position right now, and we're grateful to also, I should mention, we have OK Blockchain Capital, which is also known as OKX or OKCoin, the exchange, is an investor, and they've been a great partner, and a group out of Japan called Global Brain, which is a large Japanese fund. And then finally, we have NXTP Labs, which is the largest fund in Latin America. So there is diversity in terms of geography, and that was done on purpose because we feel that one of the most powerful things about digital securities is that they are global by nature. And so by having a global investor base strategically, it helps us really expand more quickly there.
Awesome. That's exciting news. And would you be able to say in what capacity, obviously Blockchain Capital, you said mentions a client of yours, but could you say in what capacity are you working with Coinbase and of course Ripple?
Sure, yeah. With Coinbase, we're working on a number of initiatives. They have a great custody product that we've been working together with for a few months. They have their Coinbase securities team that we've been working with. So, I think they're in the explore phase, and we're supporting that initiative. And then other folks, such as Ripple, which we're big fans of Ripple and the Ripple team. I know there's a lot of fans out there of that. So we've been actively exploring how we can leverage their platform and kind of XRP Ledger for creating digital securities. We don't have a concrete plan yet, but we are actively in the kind of research mode. And when we do something, we need to make sure that all of the components you need in order to issue a digital security are there. And that's everything from, custody all the way through to trading. And so,
Sure.
we look for all of these components as we look and evaluate different blockchains.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. So you mentioned obviously you're going to look into using the XRP ledger where possible. So that's in the works. Any plan to possibly look at leveraging xRapid, which leverages XRP for any type of funding or movement of funds?
Yeah, so in the corporate and kind of institutional space, there's a significant opportunities around the settlement layer and moving securities in exchange for currencies. And so in order to do that, you're going to need an enabling technology. And so that's definitely one of the candidate solutions. Stablecoins are obviously another one. So we're just looking at what's going to be easiest for the institutions that we're working with in order to be able to deploy it with as little friction as possible.
Got it. Makes sense. And obviously we heard recently about the IBM news. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, definitely. It's actually, so we joined the IBM Accelerator, and the initial announcement was around tokenization of debt. And so debt is sort of a different kind of product than what we've done to date, which has mainly been equity, venture funds, and real estate. So debt is kind of a new space. And so we spent a lot of time with IBM learning about the debt market and then looking at their Hyperledger platform. And as a part of this accelerator program, we're fortunate enough for them to bring in a bunch of resources to help us understand Hyperledger and help us understand debt. And so we've been working on those two pieces to kind of create what's known as a minimum viable ecosystem for a Hyperledger network around a variety of different types of debt issuance. So there are about 7 or 8 different levels of debt. And so we're starting with one called commercial paper, which we think is a great opportunity. It was actually invented by Goldman Sachs many, many years ago. And it's a very traditional arcane legacy product that can benefit from, becoming a modern financial product.
Wow. So I'm still learning about that whole process. So maybe for those who are watching, can you give maybe a kind of a high level overview of that? Is it kind of like bonds where I can purchase the debt via tokens and I would get repaid essentially? Is that kind of how it would work?
Yeah, it's exactly like that. So there's a waterfall of payments. Different people will have different payment schedules associated with them. And so a smart contract's a great way to embody that, right? Because it's just math. And so it's easy to do math in the smart contracts of what you need to be able to pay out. And so, for complex financial products with a lot of different kind of layers, blockchain and smart contracts are ideal. And so that's why it lends itself very, very well to this type of product.
Very interesting. And, we've been hearing a lot about digital stocks and the tokenization of securities and, as you just mentioned, the tokenization of debt. What's your outlook as far as how the token economy will grow, this year and maybe into 2020? Do you expect to see more of these different, I should say, use cases maybe come into play where this can be tokenized, this element can be tokenized and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of people have said 2019 is the year of the security token. In my opinion, in 2019 is a year where securities start to become tokenized. So this is the start of the modern era of finance.
Sure.
And so we're actively working on a variety of different products. You're going to see a ton of experimentation from different companies doing really great things. What I'm hoping to see, though, is more standardization in terms of the product suite so that there can be better communication to investors and so the industry can really scale. It's fantastic that we can all be tremendously creative about these wonderful new financial products, but they're really hard to understand. And when things are hard to understand, it's really hard to get somebody to buy them.
Sure.
And as somebody told me not too long ago, you have to sell securities to investors. They don't just buy them.
Right.
And so when you're selling something that's complicated that people don't understand, it's much harder than something that's simple and standardized.
Got it. And on that note of the growth of this market, what can we expect from Securitize? Obviously we heard some big news already, so you guys started off the year with a bang. But what else can we expect later this year from Securitize?
Well, I think you'll see a great many new marketplaces and exchanges, full-blown exchanges, come online. That's going to be a really big focus for this year. We thought there would be more exchanges live last year, but things have just taken longer than people expected, which I guess is normal in a nascent market. So we expect to see a lot more of that happening. And then we expect to see new types of liquidity. So when people talk about digital securities, they focus on liquidity and trading and things like that. And that is one aspect. But there are other aspects like borrowing, right? So there's another way to get liquidity, which is you give your tokens to somebody and they give you money in exchange, a loan. And since these are real assets, you can collateralize that and take a loan against it, which is a really powerful concept. Additionally, we'll start to see, real scale and liquidity come towards the end of the year, which will be fantastic. And I believe we'll see a few different countries step forward and say that, this technology is approved for trading securities in our country, like the actual SECs of each country. We shouldn't only think about the US when we think about this. It's obviously the largest capital market, but around the world, there are many, many SECs. And so people forget that. And so, you have to respect all these different countries and what they're doing. And so we'll definitely see a lot around that, I believe.
So on that note with the United States and the SEC, and if you're okay in talking about this, but the Token Taxonomy Act, is that something you feel would benefit the market? If you're familiar with that bill that was proposed to Congress, obviously not passed yet, but it aims to kind of categorize digital assets in, in a different, under a different light, I would say, it would seem.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. So I don't actually see that as the problem. Because if we look at the law as it exists today and as it's been tested thus far, what's clear is if you're selling something to somebody with an expected return, it's a security, right? I believe that there are genuinely legitimate utility token scenarios or kind of usage-based tokens, but it's not a great investment vehicle, and so I don't think that the government's going to shift on that in the U.S. very dramatically. And I believe that having sort of the current incarnation with the 1-year lockup is actually a real benefit for investors, because what happens is that bigger investors with deeper pockets have to take the risk, right? And wait for a year before they can do anything. And that means that retail investors who can purchase these things, by the way, after a year, have less risk associated with it. They don't have the same upside potentially, but they also don't have the same risk. And as we saw, in the ICO market, what happened was people were rolling money. And then at the end, people who came in last were left kind of holding the bag, and the bag was empty, right? So that's what we really don't want to see. That was less than a year, that whole ICO kind of frenzy. And so if you think about that in the context of having to wait a year before you trade, the company has to get traction. They have to grow. They have to show real numbers. And then things become liquid. And I think that's perfectly acceptable.
Sure. And obviously, this is not financial or investment advice, but what is your personal outlook on the crypto market? Obviously, we're in a deep bear market, it seems like a lot of people have left the market, but there is a lot of building happening. So what is your personal outlook?
Well, I mean, so selfishly, we kind of like where Ethereum is right now because we use Ethereum as a platform. We don't use it as a currency. We're not speculators as investors.
Sure.
So if you're using Ethereum as a platform, you actually want the price to be low. Because it makes it cheaper to do everything. Sure. And so from our point of view, it's actually in a really, really good place. I believe in Bitcoin. I think it's a fantastic store of value, but I also believe it's not a platform the same way Ethereum is, right? So this is not an Android versus iOS world. This is like gold versus iOS, right? They're totally different things. And so, in our mind, where the market is today is actually perfectly acceptable. I believe we'll see a run-up. Because there'll become more usage, and the way the economics are designed around Ethereum based on usage, the price will go up. It won't go up as fast as people want. It will probably be, a few $100s on Ethereum, but it'll still be manageable. I don't believe we're going to see $1,200 Ethereum for quite some time. Bitcoin, I can't even speculate on. I think it's Bitcoin, you have to have a belief in something broader. I lived through 2008. Where, I looked at my bank accounts and was realizing that it was all what was real and what did I actually have access to.
Sure.
And I didn't have access to any of that. And Bitcoin, I always have access to. So for me, it's valuable that way.
Right. That absolutely makes sense. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. Now, finally, for, let's say, a company or a business who is looking to leverage your service, do they just visit your website? Can you tell us a bit about the process, how they can get started with leveraging your services?
Yeah, sure. So the best way is to come in through our website, securitize.io, fill out the web form, and then we have a business development team that usually gets back to people in 2 to 3 days. We have a bit of demand at the moment, but we've been hiring folks, so we're getting better at it. We have 3 new business development people we've just brought on, one focused on Asia, one focused on the East Coast of the US, and another person here in San Francisco. So, and we'll be bringing on somebody in Europe shortly. So we're really expanding our reach when it comes to the sales side, and we'll be able to support our customers a bit more. Expect to see, quite a lot of issuances from us this year that will then be trading on these secondary markets. Our focus is really, to get to a very, I think I announced about 100 issuances is where we'd like to be at the end of the year.
Wow.
We're 93 away from that. So we've got a little way to go, but we're working on it.
Wow, that's exciting. So it looks like you got a lot in the pipeline. And I'm assuming, and I'm asking this question because I'm very passionate about crypto, but also see the value of the token economy and the tokenization of different assets. So, in the future, could we expect to see on the NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange token securities of like real estate or companies, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few steps before we get there, but there's no reason that a tokenized security couldn't trade on a public market. There's some requirements around transfer agents and things of that nature, custodians, but all that infrastructure will get there. And once it's there, we'll start to see a lot of companies do this, because having access to a real-time cap table of all of your investors and the data associated with it will be tremendously valuable. And so people are going to realize that as these products roll out, but it takes time for the market to react, but we'll definitely see it in the next 5 or 6 years.
Awesome. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today. A lot of great information, and we would love to have you back as things progress on your end. And everyone, I will put a link to Securitize website in the description of the video. Go check it out, learn about their services. This is certainly the future. So, Jamie, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.